A lot going on this slide, as Marianne said. We're running an incredibly complex system of schools, and I think it was really fascinating in the Kahoot survey. You know, folks indicated that offering more choices and options for parents was of interest to them, and so oftentimes I get asked, like, what kind of categories of schools do you have? And so this graphic represents kind of the ways that we can talk about the different kinds of schools that we have, and I'll note they're not mutually exclusive. So I'll go kind of clockwork, starting with governance structure. We've been talking about innovation network schools, and there are two kinds of those. Some of them are mayor-sponsored charters, so their governance structure, they have their own 501c3 board, and they also are authorized by our mayor's office. We also have IPS innovation schools. They also have their own 501c3 board. They don't necessarily have a charter, but they are a little bit more directly managed by us. Not as autonomous as the mayor-sponsored charter schools, but not as closely tied to us as our now traditional schools. So then the third bucket is the non-innovation schools. Those would be what you think of as a traditional district school. They report up sort of through our central office hierarchy and are most directly accountable to the IPS board. So as we go around, another way we think about our schools is kind of what level of intervention and flexibility are they receiving. So the woman over here asked about, you know, when it comes to Innovation Restart, what other things is the district doing sort of before it gets to this point? And so we do have what we call our transformation zone and priority schools. These are schools that are kind of on our watch list. They're receiving additional state dollars, sometimes state intervention, additional coaching, support, etc. And so those schools tend to have actually less flexibility than even our sort of traditional schools, but everyone gets sort of a baseline level of support. Then bottom here, sort of at, what would that be? 7 or 8 o'clock, 7:30, is sort of what is the program or offering that the school offers. So we recently moved this year to an all-choice high school model. So all of our high schools are choice programs. Some of them are innovation schools, some are not, but parents can choose, and students can choose where they attend high school. We have choice programming in the K-8 area as well, and then we also have neighborhood schools that specialize. So for example, we just transitioned one of our neighborhood boundary schools to an action-based learning program this year. Then finally, we can categorize schools by how the geography of the school impacts the enrollment process by which a child gets in. We have citywide choice programs, so that's K-8, and also, like I said, our high schools. Anywhere in the city you can lottery in, a bus will come and get you, take you to the school. We have neighborhood boundary schools. That means if you live within a certain radius of a school, guaranteed seat within that school. Something super unique to us and probably in other cities as well. We have charters that are neighborhood schools. So it's very rare that you hear of a charter school where any child that moved within the block has a seat at the school. I like that a lot because I think it combats a criticism that you hear of charters, which is that they have the ability to not take all kids, to select who they get, to cap grade levels, and it is an unfair advantage. But in our particular innovation context with the neighborhood charters, we don't see that. And then finally, we have statewide charter partners. So in the state of Indiana, unless you're an innovation school, you have to take any student who comes to you from across the state of Indiana until you meet your enrollment cap. So I know that's a lot, but I think just to sort of color the context of what we're working with. When we talk about the innovation school strategy, I think Marianne hit on the term continuous improvement, and that's the thing I want to emphasize, is that this hasn't always been a wildly popular strategy. It can be controversial, but it is a continuous improvement initiative that the district has taken in order for us to improve student outcomes. So we think about it as part of the portfolio model, which is really just a problem-solving framework that starts with giving families choices, giving schools the autonomy they need to make decisions for those kids and families, assessing school performance, holding schools accountable, and then if you're not meeting the mark, there's either interventions or you're replaced. And it fits again within our overall theory of change. Marianne alluded to this as well. All schools within the district are using student-based allocation systems. So in 2017, we moved from having principals be able to control about 3% of their school budgets to now upwards of 60%. So we've positioned a lot more authority at the school level with the appropriate supports and accountability to go with it. And innovation schools are just sort of on this continuum that supports our theory that, again, if you put more power at the schools to directly support the students, it will increase outcomes. I think that David mentioned most of this in his overview, but I think some of these are highlights that are worth repeating. So to me, and my office is responsible for kind of managing all these contractual arrangements and making this work. We come back over and over again to the fact that the students are counted in the overall IPS count and that we're accountable for their results. So these are our students. You know, there are still people who think about kids as, oh, those are charter kids and not IPS kids. But at the end of the day, they're all of our kids, and so philosophically, to make the work, we have to keep coming back to that. Our IPS Board of School Commissioners does approve every contractual arrangement with the innovation schools. So they have the ultimate authority. So in terms of where we are now, David said we've got 20 schools. That's about 30% of our overall school portfolio. We serve about a quarter, 20% or a quarter of our kids. 12 of them are charters, and 8 of them are legally within the IPS corporation. She also said our pace of change has been quite fast. So these first schools came online in 2015 when we started with 5. And then you can see there year over year how we've gotten to 20. And then also, as David said, there are 4 pathways to become innovation schools. And there we've had 2 of them were new, 5 conversions. That's the ones that say the principal leads their own staff to raise their hand and say, we want to be an innovation school. 6 times we've restarted a persistently low performing school with a contractual partner. And then we have 7 charter partners that have come into the network with us, usually for services.
Jamie?
Yes, sir.
Question over there.
Are any of the charters that you have thematic in nature, such as one for the arts, one for STEM, and how many of those charters are broken up that way, and how many of those charters are underneath the kind of the charter format that still resemble some of the same structures of a regular school?
So you said sort of how many charters are thematic versus how many are more sort of traditional in nature?
I want to also add, because a lot of people, charters are different in every state, and in Indianapolis, the district does not authorize any charter schools. So this is very interesting and a very important concept, because the charters that are innovation schools have charters with authorizers. So they have kind of double layer of accountability. They have a contract with us, and if they're in our buildings and we cancel the contract, they would still have a charter, but they wouldn't have a building. But some of the charters that have joined our network had their own buildings and a charter. So if they were to no longer have a relationship with us, it would not impact, their existence. But of those charter schools, we have a classical model, a very successful classical model, high school, 2 of those.
I think Purdue Polytechnic High School is extremely specialized. It's all project-based learning. And then kids who successfully complete that program get direct admission to Purdue Polytechnic, the program at the college.
Really cool.
And then I'm guessing, based upon your school choice, your transportation director is a miracle worker.
He is. He's awesome.
A magician and a saint, and we don't make his life easy at all. Yes, ma'am.
Any the schools have teachers and unions for the all of them?
She said, do any of our schools have teachers and unions? So Indianapolis Public Schools, the traditional schools, are still a part of our, Then by statute, when a school becomes an innovation school, those employees must resign from IPS and they become the employees of that separate 501c3, which means they're no longer eligible to be in our specific union. However, they can unionize on their own.
So I'm a huge supporter of unions. But what would be the board's worst nightmare that I think people who the law didn't quite anticipate, because each one of these schools is required by law if they want to organize as a separate unit. So we could theoretically be doing negotiations with 20 different bargaining units just on the board. So that hasn't happened yet. The charters that were already around, the charter culture is mostly not organized. But some of our schools that transitioned, I could see that some of those schools could at some point say, you know what, we want to collectively bargain. And so we haven't dealt with that yet, but that would be what would happen.
And then my last question is are the charters a part of the state retirement system, or are they on their own in regards to establishment?
They pay into PERF and TERF, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, all of them do. So even if the employees become employees at 501c3, but they're still eligible for state retirement.
Okay.
Who are the enablers of the innovative schools?
Who are the enablers?
Yes.
That is a great question. Well, I think obviously our school board is instrumental in that. I mean, it started with the kind of legislative advocacy that Marianne was describing. I've shared with another group before, it can't be understated the support of the superintendent, because even if these schools are not as directly managed by IPS, we could still really make things difficult for them if we weren't trying to adapt our systems and procedures to meet the needs of a really diverse set of schools. And so having that kind of visionary leadership at the top has been very helpful. Am I not answering the question?
Part of it.
Yeah.
The state is not denying.
The state is, because of the legislation is really the linchpin of why this can even happen.
Do you mean the authorizers? Or?
Yes.
Yeah, so the mayor of Indianapolis, we don't have an innovation school that is authorized by the state board, but we could. And then there's also, in our area, Ball State has some schools nearby, charter schools. Indiana's charter law is pretty open. So, but we just have innovation schools with the mayor's charter school.
I have just one other question.
Can I just
But
add
we could be.
I'm going
to the answer?
I want to talk to you a lot after this. Well, I'm right in the middle of something.
Can I just add one more answer to your question? I think what I hear you asking is, who's overseeing these innovation centers? When you say enabling, do you mean who's overseeing them? Who's responsible for them?
Who's pushing them? Who's behind them? Who has the authority?
The
Well, and I think
superintendent
those
and
are-
school board.
But to me, those are different questions. Who has the authority and who's pushing it? And a lot of that depends on how the school comes to exist, right? So for a conversion, we don't recruit for that. We put out on our website, we're opening a period of time where if you're interested, send my office a letter, and we're gonna start an interview process that lasts for 3 months. And so we don't push anybody's hand to do that, because that has to be led by the community, the teachers, the principal on up. If a building doesn't want to convert, we're not going to ask them to convert. The restarts are a little bit of, they're different, right? Because that's when the district itself has seen a school has had 4 or 5 Fs in a row. They're in the bottom quartile performance of our schools. They're in danger of the state coming and taking the school away from us if we don't do something quite dramatic. And so an innovation restart is kind of our way of putting a pretty intensive intervention in place, but still maintaining contact with the school. I could call them any day, I can pop by, I can visit, have a relationship with the school leaders. When the state of Indiana has taken over our schools, we lose contact with that community, and then they're gonna give the school back to us, and we don't even know what kind of condition. And so this keeps the school closer to home.
So is business and industry a major player in the innovation schools?
They're a major player in all of our schools, so we have an incredibly open, collaborative relationship with our local business community. So it's less relevant whether they're innovation or charter. They're just helping IPS. They're with all our schools. There's not some that are treated better than others by the local community in terms of their participation, if that's what you mean. And one thing I did fail to mention is, like, going back to the climate that existed, because you think, like, why would a district want to do this? I mean, what's your motivation? The state of Indiana was taking over our schools. And as Jamie said, we had no control over that. And it was clear that they had called the bluff. They had threatened to do that for years, and they did it. And so we had to step up and show that we were going to get serious about taking care of our own schools in a way, at a level that we previously hadn't. So that was one thing. We were declining enrollment district, so we're never catching up. These kids are counted in our enrollment. The money goes to those charters, but it passes through us. We don't take any of that money, but it helps us support our other services, because now we're offering transportation to more schools. We're offering food to more schools. You know, we have services that they purchase from us, so it makes it easier for us to run our own schools. And, you know, from the charter perspective, they don't have any facilities. I mean, it's just, they get 20% less public support than any of our schools do, because they don't get any money for facilities. So they're often in the position of trying to find a place, putting it right next to an IPS school that it's not coordinated. So now we're in the same room coordinating where new schools go, and I think that there's going to be even a stronger move, because you build a relationship with the authorizers. It's not adversarial. And so the mayor's office and the schools aren't making decisions that we have to then react to. We're at the table. Everybody's together making these decisions.
And our mayor's office hasn't authorized, they've only authorized 2 new schools in the last 3 years that haven't also been a part of the IPS network. And that's huge. Your hand has been up for a long time.
I just have a few statements to make. I am a retired educator from the city of Chicago, and he showed data where the Indianapolis schools are doing the charter schools doing better than the public schools. But there is no empirical data that shows that nationwide that shows that charters perform better than public schools. Teachers sometimes at charter schools are not required to be licensed, and there is no union protection. The charter schools don't pay sometimes, not all the time. There are charter schools in Chicago that have not paid into the pension system. Although they take the money out of the teachers' checks, they don't give it to the pension system. So the district is left to pay those teachers' pensions. You know, that costs money. They can close at any time at a moment's notice. They don't have to stay open. Money does not, he spoke of money coming back if the kids come out. That money does not come back if a parent decides, I don't want my child in a charter school anymore, I'm going to put him back in the public school. That money will not come back until the next year. The charter school keeps that money that year. They are, a lot of them, you said these are non-profit. A lot of them are not non-profit. They're in the business of making money, and they're taking the money from the public school. You know, I 20 years ago when charter schools first started, I had an open mind toward charter schools. But now I am totally against charter schools.
I think, I mean, and a lot of your points, like, definitely valid, and we've heard them. The one thing that makes me think is that it's all very context specific, right? So in the state of Indiana, when a parent unenrolls their child from any kind of school and moves into a different kind of school, the money doesn't follow if it's after count day, and that is terrible. That's a state problem, no matter what kind of governance model you have. And a lot of things you mentioned too, I mean, I think the thing that makes a charter district relationship like this thrive is that we have provisions in the contracts that help protect kids and teachers from those kinds of practices that have given charters a bad name, but it is different in every location.
And I would just add that in the adversarial relationship, nobody wins. And to put aside these problems for the betterment of children, I think is critical. It's just really hard to do that. And I think you solve some of those problems together better than when you're not working together. We are a powerful lobby now, because we're on the same page. And so when we go to the State House, it's not, oh, the districts want this, the charters want that. It's what do public schools in the state of Indiana need to do well. That's not the case across the state. Indianapolis is relatively unique, but I just met with some folks in Indy who are in another district who are thinking about going innovation. That was one of the components they added to the law. It used to be limited just to IPS. Now any district in the state can do this.
Curtis wanted me to tell you we have questions at the end too. You want me to keep going? Okay, this is, I think, my final slide. So they did ask me to talk a little bit about the funding model and sort of how the funding flows to the schools. Marion already mentioned that for any innovation school, the state actually gives IPS the money first, sort of mixes it in with all our money, and then we pass it through to the schools, usually based on the contractual arrangement. And that will differ based on whether or not the school is within the IPS LEA or whether or not they're a charter. And so it gets very complicated. It's a big job for our accounting team, so we thank them for their hard work. We've also made their job pretty complicated. So there's really 3 ways that the funding can differ based on the school type. So over on the far left, our traditional schools, they're in student-based allocation, right? So money follows the kiddos based on the particular characteristics of the kid. Students who are sort of historically more resource intensive to educate will get more dollars, and then that's what makes up the school budget, and then the principals have a lot of control over how they spend those dollars. And a lot of the services, we're either giving the schools in kind or we mandate them. So an example of that would be our IT service. Traditional schools don't have the opportunity whether or not to use the IPS IT or to use another vendor. You use it and we keep those dollars.
So does that follow similar kind of like your Title I funding formulas for equity?
Similar concept. Then we've got the innovation schools that were within the IPS LEA. Same thing, student-based allocation. And that was big for us because, again, it's an equity move. We want to make it clear that just going innovation is not going to get you more money. It's not going to make your school be able to get more dollars if your kids don't deserve it. We're leveling the playing field in that regard. The thing I would add that makes a difference for these schools is their own 501c3 boards add additional capacity for fundraising. So at the end of the day, they might be bringing more dollars in, but they're working for it in a way that traditional schools are just not set up to do.
And my last question on funding, you said that you're giving about 60% of the dollars to the principal. So is the principal more the academic type of a situation, and the school district is more along the lines of the facilities because they own the buildings? Or do you have the principals also still maintain facilities on the
For innovation schools?
Yes.
So if you couldn't hear his questions, he asked like, what does the principal do, right? Are they just the academic director? Are they other stuff, facilities, operations, etc.? I mean, in innovation school, the principal becomes the CEO, right? So IPS will still, if you're using our transportation, we run the routes, we get the letters out to parents, all of that stuff. We help maintain the student information system. We'll do the food service. So they don't have to handle those things quite as much, but they do become much more operational than in traditional school because suddenly they have more control over those things.
So the principals are still doing heat and air and all of those kind of things?
We do the heat and air. Yeah. We pay for it, we come and fix it when it's broken. And then finally on the other far side is the innovation charter schools. So again, the per pupil dollars that the state gives, they pass through IPS. Some have some in-kind services that we still provide. So an example of that is the heating and the air. But like Marianne said, they're already getting 20% less dollars from the state anyway. They never got dollars to take care of facilities cost. And in our minds, in a restart situation, is IPS school, full of IPS kids. IPS is the one that said, we're going to contract with somebody to help get the school back on its feet. Why would we not continue to pay to keep those kids warm, right? Because the charter, it's not going to behoove us to make the charter pay for it out of pocket. We want them using those dollars to hire teachers and get new books.
Populations, how do they compare? The demographics of special ed, more challenged students, how do they compare across the various models? That's one of the biggest problems that we see with charter schools is that they don't reflect the population of the community. It's skewed significantly, particularly in the area of special education.
Right.
And those challenged students who are behaviorally challenged.
I know that's really hard to read, but and he asked, is the population, really do you have disparities in terms of demographics across the different types? Not really, and a lot of it depends on how the school came in. So the restart schools, they're the same kids that were there the year before. They're just under a different leadership, a different governance model. Same with the conversion schools, the student population doesn't change. Now when we've sort of had some different charter schools hitch on with us, come on our train, they vary a lot, but those demographics were there before. And we've actually had some of the highest performing high school in the state join the Innovation Network just so that they could set their recruitment logic to recruit more heavily from IPS so that they could increase the diversity of their students.
Yeah, I was just going to emphasize that point.
So for the charters whose mission is to serve kids who have been underserved, they became a victim of their success. And so because state statute in Indiana requires you to do a lottery statewide, once they started getting high performance, then they started getting all these out-of-district, wealthier families applying to their school, which was not their mission. That's not who. So when they join us, we can actually draw attendance zones. They can use the old neighborhood boundaries to give priority for admissions, or they can even draw, I mean, they have tremendous flexibility about where they can target, where they're going to give priority in the lottery for admission. And so they've already seen that they are improving their diversity at these high-performing schools that never intended to look the way they do, but had no control over that. So that's another benefit for those charters.
So we're gonna, how's everybody doing so far?
Yeah.
We started off with a survey, and the majority said we've consistently struggled with supporting low-income and minority children. It was that way when I was a kid. It was that way in many places when my father was in school, my parents were in school. And for me, I come, and I've been on the school board for 5 years in Prince George's County, and I come to these places saying, how am I going to challenge myself to learn a little bit more, step outside of my box, become a little bit more uncomfortable because I was always taught if you keep doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result, that's a definition of insanity. It's a clinical definition. And so a lot of you are, this room was much more packed when we started. I'm gonna put it out there. Get a little uncomfortable. That's why we're here. I hate panels I go to and I'm like, I didn't learn very much, they didn't challenge me. If you ask me what I can't remember what they said, but I felt good when I left. We want you to walk out here saying, I gotta find someone who's gonna challenge me on something. The kids, they need it. We need to challenge ourselves a little bit more. Try it, doesn't work, try something else. We owe it to them. My kids go to a Magnet Montessori school in Prince George's County. It's a public school. When it was introduced in our county, parents, why are you introducing this and where's the money going to go? We also have French immersion, Spanish immersion, language. We have a lot of choice in our district, but not everybody wanted it when it happened. We had leadership who said, trust us on this. And now, you can't even get in there. We brought back parents, enrollment went up, student achievement went up, all the different things. So we're going to take questions, and we'll probably take 2 at a time, sort of to ensure we get as much people. So based on what you heard, questions that come to mind, a lot of questions that came about were logistical and what happened, and that's important.